that I'm going to hit. I'm going to hit it all. So China, stock market, not crashed, but definitely plummeted. And this is a major concern for the United States for many reasons. One, it's a concern for me because, in my very, very, very modest portfolio, I can't emphasize how modest it is. What happens in China affects anyone who has money invested here in the United States. And so as I opened up my app to see how bad we were hit, I just saw red lines all the way across and down to my little bitty portfolio. We didn't get hurt too badly, but it speaks to the interconnectivity of the global economy and the level to which we are in bed. What happens in China happens here. And there are some buffers. There are some laws that keeps so much investment from happening across international borders, which softens the blow. But we are ultimately trying to move head first in that direction. We're trying to get even more in bed in the international global economy. And so anytime something happens like this in China, where the stocks crash, then we're going to feel it in the United States. And that's just sort of the overview. That's the superficial conversation that many people are having. It is the result of China finally allowing their currency to devalue versus artificially inflating it and keeping it having it stronger. But the bigger implication really is the underlying conversation that you have to have with regard to this global economy. And what I mean by that is simply this. Is that we have great fears in the United States of a Chinese economy slowing down because I believe over 50%, let's just take one company, Apple, for instance, 50% of Apple's earnings came from China, which means American companies have turned their eyes towards this burgeoning middle class that is occurring in China. Simultaneously, we see the decline of the middle class here in the United States. We see more people in poverty than ever. We see the top 1% amalgamating as much wealth as possible. And so we have a situation where now the companies here in the United States, they're really afraid because if China tanks too badly, well, then there goes that middle class. If the economy slows down too much, then there goes their access to such a large middle class. Why this is important for us here in the United States is because it shows a precedent. It shows the attention and the desire of companies in the United States. Their interest is no longer necessarily in the United States middle class. We see the middle class dwindling. And over in China, we see the middle class at one time burgeoning. And so all of the investment was going, let's sell our products in China. Let's make all of our money in China. And that really shows you that we as Americans in the middle class are no longer the priority. And to me, that's the real conversation about this global economy where what happens in China happens here, but it's already happened. Not only have our jobs gone overseas, but the wealth that those jobs brings has gone overseas. And because of that, companies know that people don't have money, disposable income here in the United States like we used to. And so they look towards a middle class. All of that to set this conversation up with regards to this election, Bernie Sanders and the middle class. It's all about the growth and the sustenance, the sustaining of the middle class. These corporations need the middle class to thrive, for them to thrive. And so when we see politicians running around, gallivanting around the country, proposing policies that are not going to be beneficial to the American middle class, you should already know that's because their investors, and I call their lobbyists investors, their investors realize that they can get money from the middle class in China. This is not hyperbole. This is not conspiracy theory. This is just the cold, hard facts that The middle class in China has been the focus of our multinational corporations for a long time, not just in China, but just in Southeast Asia and that corridor. That has been the focus of corporations for a very long time, because the middle class here in the United States for the last 40 years has dwindled, and the disposable income of the middle class has dwindled. And we cannot spend the way we used to spend. And without us spending, there is no consumption. Yes, this is the Benjamin Dixon Show. We go straight from a conversation about race into a conversation about economics, because that's really that's really the undercurrent. That's what is happening right underneath our noses for the last 40 years. The attention we have been distracted by so many other things. All the while, the wealth of the middle class has dwindled. The average income of the middle class has been stagnated for over 40 years. And now we are all supposed to be concerned because the stock market in China has started to tank, and that's going to hurt people who have investments. But how many Americans even have an investment? How many Americans actually lost something today? Versus how many Americans are really just living paycheck to paycheck? How many Americans are really struggling just to make the rent, let alone go out and spend money for the holidays? And because the American middle class is in such a strained position, well, companies know they can look overseas and make their money elsewhere. So the real conversation about this stock market that you may not hear in a lot of places, but hopefully you will hear, is the effect that this crash is going to have on the Chinese middle class. And as it has a negative effect on the Chinese middle class, then it's going to hurt businesses here in the United States, because they don't have a strong middle class in the United States like they used to. They've been depending on increased profits from the Chinese middle class. But now this crash and this slowdown of their economy, this recession that's inevitable, is really going to put a stranglehold on the growth of the middle class over there, ultimately hurting the businesses over here. That's the framework. But the subtext of the framework is the American middle class is still getting screwed. We're still left out with our jobs going overseas. We're still left here with not only our jobs going overseas, but now the wealth is going overseas. And you can tell the wealth is going overseas because the attention and the concern is no longer on the buying power of the American middle class. The attention and the concern is on the buying power of the Chinese middle class. I mean, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. There's a lot of things in that conversation. I was reading an article from the AP discussing the effects that this bubble in China is having on gas prices. And there is some commentary that I want to give in regard to the competition or the opposition that I don't know if a lot of people realize is at the core of our entire economic system. You have investors who are losing their shirts because gas prices are going down. A barrel of gas is so much cheaper this year. It's cheap. A barrel of gas is cheaper today than it was in 2004. And so you have investors who enjoyed the privilege of having gas for us be $5 a gallon because they were making money hand over foot. But now that gas prices are going down, investors in the gas commodities are losing their shirts, while the rest of us are like, it's about damn time. We need these prices to go down. So there's a natural competition between interests, right? There's natural winners and losers in this economic paradigm that we live under. And the reality of it is that if we continue in this route, we're always going to be, I don't know, what's the phrase? I have a religious phrase the religious phrase is, we will always be robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? We investors need the price of gas to be exorbitant. They want gas to be $5 a gallon because they make money hand over foot, while that strangles us. And so this natural competition is, if you look at what's happening in China, it really exposes a lot of things that's really extremely relevant to American life, this election that's coming up, and the plight of the average American and the middle class.